Hey guys, what's up? It's Anna and welcome to my world. Today's video is going to be another true crime video over a case that really caught my attention and kind of got down a rabbit hole when researching it, to be completely honest. It just, like I said, really caught my eye and I knew that I had to film this video today to tell you guys about it. So today's video is over the murder of Tammy Welch, and this case goes deep and over a long period of time with a lot of crazy different details. So if you're interested in learning about the murder of Tammy Welch, then keep on watching today's video. Okay, you guys, so Tammy Welch was a 10-year-old little girl, and I do want to say that this case does take place in 1989, so we're kicking it back quite a few years into probably my favorite decade. But Tammy Welch was 10 years old and she was at her apartment complex in Jacksonville, Florida. Tammy had a younger sister that was 2 years younger than her. She was 8 years old and they were really close and they played together and got along really well, and that is what they were doing one day when Tammy was allowed to skip school and stay home and play with her sister because her and her family were going to be moving to a naval base, and so they were going to be moving. So on that day, Tammy was allowed to stay home and her sister were playing all day and all that kind of good stuff. But at one point, Tammy and her sister actually kind of got in a fight. I mean, as sisters and siblings do in general. So they were kind of in a fight and kind of arguing, so they went their separate ways, and Tammy's sister had went in for a while. So like I said, of course, they got in this argument, they went their separate ways, and now Tammy's sister was inside when their mother said, "Hey, you really need to go out and get Tammy, it's time to come back in." So her sister went out to find Tammy, but she literally couldn't find her anywhere. She was looking around the apartment complex, obviously a little bit concerned, wondering where her sister was, and then all of a sudden, unfortunately, she happened upon Tammy's body laying on the ground at her apartment complex, and she was not breathing. She was laying there and she did have blood around her shorts, around that area, and was clearly not breathing. So obviously her sister was extremely frantic. She freaked out and even had mentioned that she was like so stressed out and so, you know, just obviously taken aback by this whole situation that she actually ripped out a chunk of her own hair in frustration, and she literally went to go tell her parents that what she had found, and it had turned out that Tammy had been both sexually assaulted and then murdered. And it was later to be found that she was strangled, so she passed away of asphyxiation. Sorry, I don't know why I can't speak, but from being strangled. So obviously the oxygen cut off, and that is how she did pass away, but she was assaulted as well. Now, like I said, this is just a 10-year-old little girl, and this happened in a span of literally not that long. You know, like these girls were out there playing, having a good time, they get in one little argument, obviously separate, and then she comes back and finds her this way. So it's just insane to me how fast things can happen, and then you just walk out and you find your sister on the ground. Like, it's just wild. And it was obviously good weather out. I mean, people were out. This was an apartment complex too, so it's not like it's just a house that's secluded, you know, there's other people living like close by. Which brings me into the fact that when they were doing searching to try to find out who did this and who murdered her, they were asking around people at the apartment complex that, you know, maybe she had came in contact with, whether it was just a one-time kind of thing or somebody that, you know, she had been in contact with multiple different times. And I do want to mention too that this was, you know, this was in the 80s, and DNA recognition and stuff was not big back then. Truthfully, being able to search DNA and find out people from DNA samples is relatively, honestly, a pretty new thing. Like, back just, I mean, and really when you think about it, this was not that long ago. So really we've come a long way with DNA. So back then they really didn't have that recognition. So when they were searching through suspects, they did come across a man that they were looking at, whom Tammy would go to his house, to his apartment, to play with his pets. And when I heard that, I'm just like, that's really creepy and fishy, because it's just a little 10-year-old girl going to this adult man's house to like play with his pets. I kind of thought, okay, well, he probably did it. And then I did realize and think that back then people didn't worry as much as they do now. You don't have to be as careful as you do now. I just remember, for instance, my mother telling me all the time about how back when she was young, like a little girl, you know, you can go places without having to be under constant watch by parents, etc. You can go to the store. I mean, kids did that stuff all the time, so it wasn't as abnormal as it would be now. But that proved to be a negative thing. They were really concerned at first because, and this may sound weird to some of you guys, the man that they were investigating, that she would go over to his apartment to see his pets, he was really wanting to be helpful during this investigation, and they actually found that as weird. They basically said that a lot of times when people do that, it's because they have like a conscience, you know, like that they could be guilty, and so they're just like wanting to help and, you know, see what happens. So they were a little bit concerned, but his alibi did check out, and it was said that he did not do this. So they came across another man whose name is James Leon Jackson, and he lived in this apartment complex. They had interviewed him, you know, looked into him really good, and this man also checked out. He denied about knowing anything having to do with her, and he just checked out. So they went on their way. The case went like there was nothing, no new lead, nothing like that. For quite a long time, they just couldn't find who did it. And so therefore, quite a few years passed, and they had decided to go ahead and revisit this case. And I do want to mention, of course, a lot of years have went past now, and in interviews it was really only her sister Jennifer and then her father Michael who was giving a lot of recognition, because this part stuck out to me a lot. They said that her mother was literally so devastated that she literally never got over it enough to be able to talk about it and give help towards the situation. Like in a lot of different interviews, she wasn't there. It was mainly her sister and her father. So anyway, so many years have went past. DNA has came into the picture, y'all, and they decide to swab pieces of Tammy's clothing to see if they can get any kind of DNA off. So this part is a little, I was like, oh my gosh, it was kind of crazy. So they send off her clothing to be swabbed at a DNA lab, and then they get a hit. They say, we found DNA on this piece of clothing, and it has came back, and we know whose DNA it is. And then, you know, the investigator said, okay, who? And the person who did the DNA test said, me. So it turns out somehow the person who performed the DNA analysis on Tammy's clothing somehow got his own DNA on her clothing, whether it was from sneezing or coughing, something like that, and it was his own DNA. So once again, nothing had been found. So they wait a little longer, and then they try again, and then more DNA comes back, and finally they have a lead. Can you guess who it is? Do you think it's somebody that is completely new or somebody that they have interviewed before? Because if you guess it was someone they interviewed before, you would be right. It was James Leon Jackson. Just before I go on, I want to say that I feel like this happens so much when I am learning about different true crime cases, that the killer ends up being someone that they have interviewed a long time ago, and where the cases went cold and stuff like that, and where they've literally had them under their noses and it just, you know, nothing happens, and it's crazy. But yes, James Leon Jackson's DNA was on her clothing, and that's what came back. So they ended up arresting James, and obviously he was in jail waiting trial. And then this part right here is crazy, literally crazy, you guys. So in court, when they were having this man's trial, it was said that although of course he was denying it and pleading non-guilty, guys, he had a tattoo on his back of Tammy Welch. The tattoo literally said Tammy Welch 1984 on his back. So I mean, and he literally claimed not guilty. I mean, why would you have that on your back if you were not guilty? Like, that just made no sense. And so in court he testified that he didn't know that the tattoo was on his back. He said that while he was in jail, him and some friends, like jailmates, were doing tattoos on each other, and that he was getting a touch-up or freshen up of a tattoo, and they played a prank on him by tattooing that on his back. So he claimed he didn't know it was even there. I mean, what do y'all think? I mean, I know what I think. I think that's crazy. But anyway, so that's what was said. Obviously, the jury wasn't buying it, and in the end, he was convicted of murdering Tammy. And he had even said, he even said that, like, she was a little girl, and he said, I wouldn't kill no little girl, and that's what he had said. But I mean, obviously we know that just pretty much has to be hogwash. But he was convicted of first-degree murder, capital sexual battery, and tampering with evidence. And so of course he was convicted. The jury didn't buy it, and so finally justice was served in that way. It still took more years for different things to happen with him being arrested and convicted, and it didn't even completely happen until 2013. But without the DNA testing and stuff, I mean, it literally could have gone unsolved for many more years, if not forever. So I'm glad that that finally obviously happened. I do feel really bad, though, like I mentioned, that her mom literally never got over it enough to be able to speak out and kind of do stuff like that, which was really spoke to me, because whenever I research these cases and I watch true crime shows a lot, I don't really hear that a lot, so I know that it has to be extra hard on her. But her sister and father have been an advocate for her for the longest, and I completely understand her mother not being able to talk about it. I honestly couldn't even imagine. But luckily, like I said, he was convicted and the case is finally solved. I hate that it had to go for that long, but definitely thankful for DNA. But anyway, what do you guys think about this case? Have you heard of it before? What are your thoughts? Let me know down below. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed today's true crime video. Please make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, which you can do by hitting my face right up there. And you can watch another one of my videos by clicking right over there. And like I said, it would mean the world to me, you guys, if you would come and subscribe to my channel and join the family. Also, make sure to subscribe to my main channel. It's Anna Louise for all the pet content. And other than that, I hope you have a great day or night or whenever you may be watching this, and I'll see you guys in my next one.